Welcome back to another Whiteboard Wednesday. Now in today's video, I'm answering a question from a viewer about warm-up before a race. Now the viewer asked a question specifically about warming up for a mountain bike race, but the information in this video that I'm about to share can be applied to all disciplines. Before we do that, if you're serious about your training and maximizing your performance, make sure you hit the subscribe button in the middle of the screen now. That way, whenever I upload a new video, you're going to get an instant notification so you don't miss out on any of the training tips and advice that I've got coming up. So do that now, and now let's go and check out warm-up. Or should we actually be calling it warm-up? Let's go and see. Okay, so warm-up. Now I got this question specifically about mountain bike racing, but the information contained in here can be used across any discipline, okay? I opted to stick to intermediate to long events primarily because that's who watches these videos. I've skipped the short sprint type warm-up, but intermediate long covers most things, so we'll see how we go. So warm-up. Now, before we even start, warm-up's probably a really bad word for what we're trying to describe. Now, warm-up suggests that the thing we're after is getting our muscles warm, and that is one component of warm-up, as we can see here. Benefits, increasing muscle temperature, but it is also a negative part of warm-up as well. Increasing our muscle temperature when we're racing in a hot environment is a negative impact on performance. So, what I want us to think of warm-up air really is priming. So pre-race priming, that's what we're after, priming the body for performance. So, moving on. Benefits of a warm-up or a priming session before a race. We increase the muscle temperature. Some performances are determined largely by muscle temperature. That is primarily sprint activity. Endurance activity, it is important to get the muscles not so much warm but activated, and that's what we want to talk about. The biggest ones that we really want to focus on is increasing of the metabolic rate, so increasing our metabolism, which increases fuel mobilization. So we get our fuel systems primed and ready to go. We release glucose into the system, start to stimulate some fatty acid breakdown as well. Increase our sympathetic nervous system. Remember, the sympathetic nervous system is all about fight or flight. Get some adrenaline going so that we're ready to race. We're going to increase our heart rate, and that's really important for priming the cardiovascular system, and I'll talk about this more when we get into our specific sessions. And also getting mental activation, so getting that mental activation so we're ready to roll. Again, also just that neuromuscular activation, and that's really important for sprint stuff as well, but also for intermediate and long. So some of the negatives of a warm-up or a priming session is, in a hot environment, we don't want to get our muscles too warm. And that is because the body has a critical core temperature that when you reach it, it'll start down-regulating work output because you're getting too hot. The body doesn't want to cook itself. So if you start with high muscle temperature, then the proportion that you're able to get to before you hit that temperature is reduced. So you've got less capacity to store heat. So in hot environments, try and stay cool before a race. Having this sort of a setup sometimes isn't practical, okay? So in some situations, warm-up or priming sessions aren't practical. You may have to be in a starting area, for up to 30, 40, even more minutes before a race starts. So there's no option to go and do a priming session. And also you're burning energy, okay? When you're doing a priming session, you're using your energy. So you want to be careful about how you manage the energy, how you manage your heat, and then also make something that's practical. So what I'll do is I'm going to outline some of the research that is around priming sessions or warm-up, and then we're going to look at how we can tailor those. So in an intermediate event, this is somewhere between 5 minutes and an hour. Now you may look and think, well, 5 minutes is a pretty short event. When you look at the energy systems that are used, are pretty much the same between 5 minutes and an hour. Anything under 5 minutes becomes more sprint orientated. Anything over an hour, the intensity starts to drop away. So a warm-up or a priming session for an intermediate length race would start off with 10 to 15 minutes of just steady activity, in this case riding for a mountain bike or a cyclocross race, and then increase some fast pedaling drills. So this is 1 minute, pedaling as fast as you can, 1 minute of recovery. 1 minute, bring that pedal rate up to stimulate that neuromuscular system, 1 minute of recovery. Repeat that 5 times. Then 2 5-minute ramps. And these ramps, we're going to ramp up, so every minute you're going to increase your intensity over the 5-minute time until you're hitting a hard effort for the last minute, or somewhere around your threshold, zone 4. So you're going to do 2 of those separated by 5 minutes. And then the key thing is you want to stop your priming session or warm-up with about 5 minutes before the start. And this is really key because all of this is designed to crank up your cardiovascular system, to make sure you're consuming oxygen so that when the starting gun goes, you don't become severely anaerobic. If you're standing on the start line cold, so to speak, you haven't done a priming session, your heart rate's low, your oxygen consumption's low, when the gun goes, to get your body up to that speed, there's a huge anaerobic component that happens. And that's going to chew through that muscle glycogen, produce a lot of lactate, come back to bite you later on. So what we want to do is finish about 5 minutes before the race, so our oxygen consumption is still elevated, so that when the gun goes, bang, we're largely aerobic without too much anaerobic. Now, for a long event, something over an hour but less than 5 hours, again, start off with just 10 to 15 minutes of cruising around on your bike, making sure it's working properly, that it's feeling all good. And then a 5-minute up tempo, so this is sort of zone 3, edging up into zone 4. And again, stopping this effort about 5 minutes before the race start. Again, the same reason. When that gun goes, we want to be primarily aerobic, so we don't use a large anaerobic energy stores. Now, for a long race, if you know that it has a very fast start, like some long races do, I'd introduce a couple more of these little ramping efforts. The reason that these aren't included in over here is because sometimes it's assumed if it's a long race, you gradually start to get into it. But if you know it's traditionally a fast start, then putting some of these harder efforts in there can be really beneficial. Now, what about the practicality side of things? If your race requires you to be in a staging area or a holding pen for say 10-15 minutes beforehand, you're not able to do this, okay? If that's the requirements, well then no one else is able to do it anyway, so don't stress too much about it. But the other option could be to get a wind trainer set up, get someone to hold your place in the staging area while you go and do your warm-up. There are ways around it, so think about it. Otherwise, getting in your warm-up beforehand and then letting yourself sort of cool down while you're in the staging area is better than doing nothing at all. So have a think about that. See how you can apply these strategies to your own pre-race preparation and start thinking about them as a priming session rather than a warm-up, so to speak. So there you have it. If you've got any more questions about this topic, let me know. If you've got a specific race that you're preparing for and you want to know how to go about it a little bit more, let me know the details and I'll see if I can help you. If you want more information about how you can improve your training, you might want to check out this video up the top about how to use crash training cycles to improve your performance. Or check out this video down the bottom here about what causes cramp and how to stop it. If you found this video useful, give it a like, give it a thumbs up. Feel free to share it with your mates. If you've got any other questions, let me know so that I can help you out, so that you can train harder, but most importantly, train smarter.